everyone, and welcome to the Ion Can podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Joel. Matthew is off this week, but I brought a very special guest co-host along with me, my friend Red Leader. Say hi.
Hey.
Yes, I brought him here because we are going back. Last time we talked about how the prequels affected the expanded universe. Well, now we're going back to that time before the prequels to talk about Tales of the Jedi. Woo! Volume 1, technically. Oh, yes, technically speaking. We'll get into why in a bit. It's interesting. So yes, we're excited for that. Of course, check us out. You can always follow us. Let me get the banners. Follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod as usual. And this Wednesday, everybody, keep up your tractor beam because we have a very special episode for you planned. I'm sure Matthew's very excited. I wish he'd be here to plug it, but he and Star Raptor will be interviewing Ethan Sachs, the writer of Star Wars Bounty Hunter, as part of Star Wars Podcast Day. So we're all very excited for that. Great find, everybody. So check it out. Tractor Beam Wednesday. I believe it's 6 p.m. Pacific, which would be 9 p.m. Eastern, because Wednesday is for comics. All right, I think that's all the plugs. So we're going to start off, unfortunately, it's a little bit of sad news. Carl Weathers, Grief Karga, passed away, age of 76. Very sad. Very sad. Great actor. I've never seen any of the Rocky films, but of course we all know him as Grief Karga on The Mandalorian. And I really loved Grief's arc in The Mandalorian. I think Navarro, all that stuff, is like some of the more interesting arcs in the show. Just in seeing the rundown. I guess it's a lavally rock planet, kind of become a functioning civilization, and his arc from head of the Bounty Hunters Guild to respective magistrate again. That was such a fun arc throughout all those 3 seasons. And, I think he was some of the best stuff in every season so far. And, he just brought so much charisma to the character that, Carl Weathers will be missed. But,
yeah.
Red, you got anything to say? I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I mean, Carl Weathers was such a... I think for a lot of people, he's the first African American actor they immediately can recognize growing up. You see him in Predator, you see him in Rocky, and being a major action star and stuff. There's a lot of recognizability with him because of that. I mean, that was what was so exciting when he was announced for Star Wars. Was hey, we're getting Carl Weathers. That was one of the things that immediately made me excited for the show. And it's definitely sad to lose him when he was such a big part of 80s and 90s action stuff, and again, such a prominent black actor.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, and I think his role in The Mandalorian, especially, I think it's Navarro and his arc are one of the more it's just such a night and day. Season 1 to season 3. That was sort of one of the best things, and it will be sad that won't get to see him in the big screen, helping out Din and Grogu. But yeah.
And Eckhart's Ladder pointed it out. He's completely right. Carl Weathers understood the assignment so well of just he never hammed it up or didn't take it seriously, but he understood that this was Star Wars is silly, and he let himself be melodramatic as hell sometimes, and the kind of he nailed what Star Wars was. He understood what he was a part of.
Exactly, I agree 100%, and he will be missed. All right. Awkward transition to now some fun. Our week in Star Wars, where I just give my fun thoughts as usual. Funny enough, this actually will be a Mandoverse thought because I had some weird thoughts from doing what I normally do, which is applying real world history to Star Wars, which is it's always a little dangerous thing to do because you never know what they're going to do with it. But I had some thoughts. So my thoughts were okay. So I've been like on a like a 20th century kick recently. And I've been thinking a lot. Everyone says, "Oh, like the First Order and stuff," or like the what if the Argentinian Nazis all got together after World War II and whatnot. But I've been thinking. This is honestly, I've been looking at the Shadow Council and the Warlords and stuff, and like what I would do, like if I really wanted to like go in deep with those guys. To me, it's not the post World War II era. I've been thinking a lot of the right wing movements in Germany post World War One, and how like all the different factions from the Nazis to like the militarist and the others and the aristocrats, like they all wanted the same thing, but they didn't all want it in the same way. I feel like that's where the empire is right now, where it's like you got some who are just militarist. You got the First Order type, which I guess like are the Nazis. You got the aristocrats. You got those who want to restore the Kaiser. People who don't want to restore the Kaiser. Um, and I was literally like thinking, like, is this like is the Thrawn campaign like their beer hall putsch? Is Thrawn Ludendorff in this situation? Um, and I don't know. I just started thinking like sort of that factionalism of like just all these people who all want the same thing, but they all hate each other, and they all want it in various different ways. But you're a World War One buff, Red. What are your thoughts on these weird thoughts of mine?
So the Sith Eternal makes a lot of sense if you think of them as the Fool Society.
Yeah.
Like, how much do you know about the Bavarian Soviet Republic?
Very little, except that it got crushed by the German army.
Yeah, so in Bavaria, in Munich specifically, there was this society of Aristophanists, I think is how you pronounce it. Essentially, people who the Aryan stuff comes from them. These mystics and like cultist kind of European people obsessed with runes.
Right.
Those guys, and before, and in fact, Hitler hasn't even come to like right wing politics really yet, or not in any prominence. These guys were really the leader of a lot of the far right in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And when a bunch of shenanigans happened with the Munich Soviet, or with Munich itself, but also with the larger Soviet, and they end up capturing a bunch of members of the Thule Society, including a prince who was like, because it's European royalty, was related to like every other monarch in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think they gave like an ultimatum because they end up, the Red Army there ends up crushing the Weimar government's army when it tries to attack them in Dachau, which is a haunting bit of symmetry there of what will happen to the communists later in 20 years. And a lot of these were Jewish communists as well, led by Eugen Levine.
Mm-hmm.
But like these cultist guys, the Thule Society, they execute a bunch of them like part of an ultimatum, including that prince guy, which causes the Weimar government to completely just give more power to the Freikorps because they were a little bit afraid at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and then just bring the hammer down, and they just execute so many people. And I think those esoteric societies are something that I really wish didn't just. It makes sense that they are there for sure, because Palpatine would absolutely create that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Though I do wish we got more of that interplay of them within the First Order. Because we got it with like the Acolytes of the Beyond. I remember being excited about those guys in Aftermath.
Yeah, I hope that's
like,
something that comes back and like other stuff too.
Yeah, because you're gonna get, like you said, those militarists. I mean, hell, the Kaiser was still asking for his crown back. Prince Ruprecht, who was like the one good monarch who actually like was on the front lines throughout World War One. It was like really, really talented. Kept asking for his monarchy back, but he refused. He didn't work with Hitler, but he also still was like asking,
Right.
just can I have my crown back? Because he was crown prince for I think for Bavaria. But like yeah, you have this weird mix of like what's his face? It's not Hindenburg. Like
Yeah, Hindenburg.
he's siding with Hitler, but also disliking him immensely, more for personal reasons and stuff. Like yeah, those weird combinations of like I guess your Pelion would be maybe Pelion
Strausser?
is
Strausser?
maybe he is Ludendorff though, because he is like the more maybe not, but like conventional military guy. And then you have Hux, who's definitely
Mhm.
a Hitler figure or Strausser brothers uh, sort of person.
Yeah, I mean that's like the. I mean, you're talking about the interplay. I mean, that's sort of with like again, it's like when the what we call it, like the expanded EU stuff and other material comes. Like I would love to see like what are these various factions like with each other, right? Because like we like that. I love this. Like that's actually my favorite scene in season 3, Mandalorian. Is the Shadow Council scene. You can kind of tell that Pelion and Hux are kind of like the two-headed Hydra, the leaders of the group, and then the others are kind of like. They got like the pirate warlord imperial guy and the lady, and then the other guy, and then the guy with like the fur coat. Like he's clearly living the good life. And then Thrawn's gonna show up, and it's like he's got to deal with Hux, and he probably doesn't like Hux, even though they want the same thing. But yeah, that was sort of my general thoughts of just that kind of like, oh, it's kind of post World War One. If Palpatine is the equivalent of like the Kaiser. Now just imagine Palpatine with a big old mustache.
That would be great.
Or the Kaiser on the Omen harness just zooming around. Woo!
Palpatine did have his pleasure yachts.
That is true.
Because remember, Wilhelm wasn't there to receive updates shortly after the Archduke was assassinated because he went on his yacht for 2 weeks during the July crisis.
That's
is part of how this happened.
That's true. I've tangent. I've been reading the Dark Empire source book because it's really fun. It's like it's weird to see like Palpatine like he's just throwing dark side parties. Like he's like just imagine like Palpatine be like the epic party guy. Like oh, you're the night like everyone just dancing and drinking it up. It's like dark siding it up, man. Palpatine
Early
on his
EU really does play with that a lot.
I know
like
Palpatine
that
is
with
like
what's his face? Triclops or Trioculus? I forget which.
Palpatine's Pleasure Palace on Biss, everybody. That's where to be. That's where all the cool stuff happens. But yeah, that's my week of Star Wars. Just some fun historical thoughts. Here's your history lesson, everybody. Brett, did you do anything Star Wars fun related this week? You want to talk about?
I finished Fallen Order, or not Fallen Order, Survivor, Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. We talked about it off camera. We can talk about it here.
It's a very good game. Story-wise, I do feel like there were emotional beats that the first one hit that just weren't there with Survivor for me, which maybe I just overhyped it because people were saying the story was better. Maybe I am just the minority of people who like really liked Fallen Order's story. It definitely makes me excited for the future for these games and for or in the mood for what's it, Outlaw? I know that's completely different studios, and we'll see what Ubisoft does, but definitely put me in the kind of sense of like going around Koba, like yeah, man, I would really love more than one planet that's of this scale and the adventuring stuff when you're dealing with the criminal elements.
Canto Bite. Let's go.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
No, I think for me, it's like I think Fallen Order has the stronger narrative, like just in terms of the overarching narrative. But I like certain moments of Survivor a lot, like the ending. and that's not derogatory. I mean, I legit like the final act
Mhm.
quite a bit. Um, but I mean, like I think Survivor. Well, see, I get these two mixed up.
Yep.
I keep saying Survivor, and I just want to say Fallen Order. I mean, but like Fallen Order has like, of course, Order 66, which of course. Every Order 66 is like, no.
Mhm.
Especially when the music played, it's like, oh no, everything just going downhill. And I just think more of a streamlined narrative with Trilla and the Inquisitors and all that. Well, Fallen Order's a bit more kind of all over the place. I do actually really like, though. I think, though, like, again, it's like certain moments. Like, I love the moment at the beginning of Survivor, though, where Cal's just looking at the Jedi temple, and
Mhm.
it's now the Imperial Palace, and it's like, oh, dude, that was his home. Look how the
I
Emperor
went
just
back to
filed.
I went back to Coruscant multiple times, hoping for him to talk to Marin or someone about it, and he never does. And it's like, come
Oh,
on, have a moment like that, because I always have that thing I talked about with Ferris Lin when he and Trevor, the street rat kid who hangs out with him on his adventures, when they go to Coruscant and he sees the desecrated temple and he is just enraged and angry, and Trevor's like, "Oh yeah, the Emperor said that the Jedi had like a hidden treasure there," and he's like, "We didn't have treasures. It was just a place of worship." And he's angry and upset, and yeah, I do love that. Just Cal being very moody.
I feel like it. I feel like it with this before the palace became when the temple became the palace. Was that just wrecked?
Yeah, Palpatine kept it completely desecrated, just sitting there as sort of a way of mocking the Jedi. Like in there's like a pile of lightsabers, like an entire room that's just lightsabers taken from killed Jedi. And Ferris is like picking them up and he's recognizing like, oh, this was Ayla's lightsaber, this was Kid's lightsaber, this was Mace, and he's like, yeah.
Yeah, let me. And then here it's like, and then Cal's time it's like, nope. Palpatine's like, I'm moving in. Vader, get the luggage.
It's good real estate.
Good real estate. I'm taking Yoda's room. The bed might be small, but I just want to enjoy it.
What room did he probably use?
I want to say he took Yoda's room just because he wanted to be petty about it.
Yeah. Maybe he used that for like his spare stuff. Like that's where he keeps his shoes or his cloaks. Because I can imagine he uses one of the spires.
Yeah, true. He uses the council chambers, spires. Made that his office. I actually don't know which one is his office. I'm going to assume it's just the Jedi Council. He wants the top one for himself. But yeah, I mean, no, I think I am more or less in agreement with you on that. But I am excited for Outlaws. Really excited to get to see Canto Bight and Kijimi. Just to kind of see what that's all like. That's really fun. I think that I'm actually curious as well, just for the final, or where we probably assume a final. I think there'll be a trilogy at least of these Jedi games goes, because I feel like one more. They got one more in them for sure, and I'm kind of curious what they'll do to wrap it up in like a satisfying way, but also like how big they'll be allowed to go. Because that's actually one thing I actually think. Sorry for taking turn to Jedi Survivor, but this is sort of just popped in my head. I was watching a really good video, kind of talking about Jedi Survivor and The Force Unleashed. It's kind of the last two big Jedi-centric games. Not in like, oh, this is better, this is worse. It's just kind of like, oh, there's certain similarities here, but also differences because they're trying to do different things. And one thing I found interesting was, the story where it's like in Force Unleashed, Starkiller is basically retroactively now the fifth founder of the Rebel Alliance. Got that picture of him and Garm and Mon and Bale. But in Fallen Order, and which is I think both in Fallen Order and Survivor, Cal he's very much. I don't want to say Cal's not important, but he's not shaking up the galaxy in any big way. I feel like weirdly enough, Vader has like almost the most poignant line in Survivor where he goes like, the fortress still stands. The Inquisitorius still hunts down the Jedi. And he's sort of like Vader's like taunting you, like, yeah, you're not that important. You're not changing the galaxy. You're not Luke Skywalker. You're not even an Ezra. So I'll be very curious to see just what they do for Cal's journey in that final game. But I assume it's gonna be the final game. In terms of the Jedi game trilogy. But yeah. Fall Survivor, good game, but I think I also agree with you, Red. Very I think this first one's a little bit more streamlined.
We
But all right.
take what we can get with Star Wars games.
That's true. But I mean, but Fallen Order and Survivor, I still think are like some pretty top tier Star Wars games.
Oh yeah, just we get like one a year.
Yeah, that's yeah. I agree.
Back in the day,
in the
'90s, we had honestly not that many more games, but a lot of fun with that stuff.
Yeah.
Around 1994, when a certain comic series was coming out.
Yeah, some certain tales. Some Tales of the Jedi. Oh, yes, we're back with Tales of the Jedi, Volume 1, Knights of the Old Republic. Okay, so probably asking yourself, audience, why we're calling it Volume 1, instead of not Volume 2, because we did one already. Well, because like all good Star Wars likes to make prequels after its original run. So this is the true start of the Tales of the Jedi series by Tom Veitch. I should probably actually put down when exactly these came out. These ones,
I believe,
90,
in 94.
Yeah, October of 1993, and then they ended of 94. This is at least the first set. Free to Net Uprising came later. So yeah, this is the true start of the Tales of the Jedi series. The ones we read before, read the Golden Age of the Sith Empire and Fall of the Sith Empire. Those came out later. So yeah, let's get to it, and I'll just start with this question to you, Red. Last time we read Kevin J. Anderson's Tales of the Jedi editions with the Fall of the Sith Empire and the Golden Age of the Sith. Strike that, reverse it. Reading this, what are the differences in your mind between like Veitch's writing and Anderson in terms of like their priorities, their strengths and weaknesses, what you preferred? Kind of, I guess, what was your overall impression here?
I much prefer Veitch.
Mhm.
He's one of my such a fun Star Wars writer.
Agreed.
And Anderson himself said, in hindsight, he really wishes he hadn't done much when he created Nomi Sun Rider and everything, and Exar Kun, because he was like, Veitch did it so much better. I really wish I had just let him do that first. It's been minimal.
Do you think? And I'm kind of, we can talk about this when we kind of get into the later editions. Do you think that maybe it would have benefited the story for them to co-write both of these together? I mean, did he make Nomi Sun Rider? I thought that was a Veitch creation, because I'm never quite sure what's what anymore.
Vima Sunrider is in Dark Empire. She's mentioned as one of the great Jedi by Odan by Odan who is also in that as a tree.
Right.
On Ossus.
Right.
And then in Jedi Academy, Nomi, Oden and Exar Kun, and I believe they reference Ulik in that as well, are all in that, and we get the holocron with Oden and, or it might have been Vodosius Boss actually, and Nomi explaining the events which hadn't happened yet, because that's, when are those timeline or not timeline wise, real world?
Well, let's see. Jedi Academy trilogy. Here, we're looking stuff up. That came out in not 93. That was 94. February of 94. Huh. That is interesting. So before. Well, now my brain just is confused because I thought when last time we talked, Jedi Academy came out first, and then Tales of the Jedi came after that.
It came out before the. It came out before the stuff that deals with the ancient Sith.
Right. That I remember.
Talking about that.
Right, that I know. And it came out before, obviously, the XR Kun issue, Dark Lords of the Sith.
Yeah, I think that might have been it, because it does come well. Well, also we don't get the XR Kun stuff until '94, right?
No, that comes later. That the Tales of the
I mean,
Jedi.
until book 2. Yeah.
No, book
I
3.
mean, in oh yeah, it's way later. XR Kun isn't really a thing until. In fact, let me check when he gets referenced, because it's weird, but it's so instructive of how things worked at that time.
Oh no, I
So
agree. Well, I agree, and I'm curious while you look it up. This is something we can ask
I
later
did
again.
find it.
Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead. Tell us.
The character of Exar Kun was created by Kevin J. Anderson uh, as an antagonist in the 1994 trilogy. He first appears as a dreamlike dark man in Jedi Search, which is the first novel, is properly introduced in Dark Apprentice, uh, and then like really quickly after that, Veitch says, "Let's combine." Okay, yeah. So Tales of the Jedi was already running, and Veitch says, "How about I use Exar Kun in my story?" So okay, that's what Anderson was, because then that makes sense. Yeah. So Veitch was writing Tales of the Jedi. Anderson has set up this Dark Man spirit Sith thing that becomes Exar Kun. And then Veitch says, "How about I bring that in?" Which is why at the end of Freed Mad Uprising, they set up some additional Jedi we haven't met yet are going to show up, which is hyping for Dark Lords of the Sith. And so Anderson has essentially created Exar Kun already and said that at the same time, like in knowing that they're both going to be using that character at the same time for the
Mm-hmm.
end of the Tales, for the latter part of Tales of the Jedi and the last book,
Mm-hmm.
Champions of the Force, which will explain who Exar Kun is. And so
Right.
those are coming out like around the same time, but Anderson gets precedence for creating that. And so Veitch is kind of working off of what his drafts are, or whatever, as those are coming out like right at the same moment.
Yeah, I mean, talk about some early coordination right there.
Which would be why Nomi is in. Nomi would have been created first in '93, but then is in the third book because she's already been written by Veitch, and they have established between the two of them that those characters interact, or that those characters are in the same period.
Right, and that's and this is kind of what I was leading to. Thinking about it, it's like it's almost interesting. Like in hindsight, although I'm fine with how it goes, I think I enjoy what we get. But it is kind of interesting. Like yeah, XR2 just kind of shows up in the third volume. It's like we just deal with this Onderon stuff, and then we get with the Freedom Net Uprising, and then all of a sudden, kind of becomes the rise of XR Kun as our ultimate big bad. Even though he kind of shows up kind of at the halfway point, with the Sith War, which with when Dark Lord of the Sith happens, and eventually the Sith War, which was from 95 to 96. And I guess I just kind of curious if do you think maybe you could have gotten Tom Veitch and Anderson to co-write both of these together and maybe pepper out the overarching storyline, or and we can come back to this question as we continue on with our series, hopefully.
I mean, I think Anderson does co-write the end of. I think he co-writes Sith War. I might be wrong about that.
I looked it up. He just writes it. Veitch does not write Sith War.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They only co-write Dark Lords of the Sith, which is funny enough my favorite one, but we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah, I think Veitch definitely has better characterization throughout all the Star Wars stuff. I mean, his plotting is not the thing people really remember, but and his characters aren't always. I mean, Dark Empire isn't a deep character study or anything, but you remember it for the pathos, for the melodrama, and sort of the
for Palpatine getting
understanding.
flipped over his bed.
Yeah, it's all so over the top, kind of theatrical stuff, and Veitch really nails
Hmm.
that. And one of the reasons I love buying single issues is because you get letters pages.
Oh yeah.
Albeit in this, there's only like 2 of them that have letters pages in them. But in these, you get a lot of people writing in and being like, "Star Wars is back!" Woo, like celebrating
Woo!
that because there hadn't been much in the way of Star Wars content. Yeah, Dark Empire, but ever since the Marvel run ended and the series got handed over, I think classic Star Wars starts up towards the end of as this miniseries is coming out because there starts to be ads for it in the back of the issues. But a lot of people start getting really back into Star Wars stuff in the '90s. People who had kind of grown up with it
Hmm.
on like VHS and whatnot when they were, or maybe saw Return of the Jedi in theaters. Uh, but this brings Star Wars back as like an actual ongoing thing for them for the first time in their lives. And you
Oh
already
yeah.
see that or you already see that excitement for a lot of people in the letters pages of that, and people being happy that there's all this stuff that's people are like, I was not on board for a story that's not about Luke Skywalker. It can't be a story about Luke Skywalker, but Veitch proved me wrong. And it is interesting that, yeah, prior to that, we always had people who were connected to the original trilogy. Like, until we get to the prequels, the mainstream audience isn't necessarily used to that, but Veitch really introduces people to no, Star Wars can be tone
Right.
more than anything. And this is completely tone for its
Oh god.
connective tissue.
Oh god.
And
Yeah.
he just goes for it. And, there's hits and misses in there, but he's really the one experimenting with what is Star Wars in a way.
Yeah, I mean it's the '90s. I think everyone was kind of experimenting with what is Star Wars.
Mhm.
Uh, from the sci-fi of Tim Zahn to this. Uh, yeah, you're right about the tone. Because like when I was reading it, a lot of it, I felt like I'm reading Star Wars and certain takes on Star Wars, but just like in different skins. Like you have the Hut, you have a Jabba the Hut. He had literally like a sand. He had a sand barge, like
Mhm.
Jabba the Hut with the Nomi stuff. The Queen Aminoa, she's kind of like the Emperor but female. Um, in the audio drama, she's got like the evil, wicked voice, and goes that kind of that Palpatine kind of stuff.
Mhm. You have a lot of the hole that the early EU stuff falls into of repeating lines from the movies. Like the
Yes.
amount of people who say like luminous beings are we, and it's like, come on, you can, or like when they're explaining the Force to Nomi, it's like it binds the others together, it penetrates. It's like you don't have to have Obi-Wan literally be quoting them
I
in
mean,
hindsight.
we have a Jedi Master who you don't expect is a Jedi Master who's a Jedi Master.
And that's what absolutely works. That's
Oh
when
yeah,
that stuff hits, because it's not just saying let's play the greatest hits. He does the reverse Yoda.
it's
What
a
if instead of
dinosaur.
he's a dinosaur dog thing that they ride, and you realize, oh, he's actually a Jedi Master.
And he smokes.
Yeah, he's so Master Thon is one of my favorite things about Tales of the Jedi. He is just such a nice subversion. Uh, it reminds me of I was watching a video the other day that was fantastic on how Star Wars species are created, like in terms
Hmm.
of development wise.
Hmm.
Uh, and that person talked about like the history of Miles Kanata, of like originally being just female Yoda, like they were just creating characters that looked just like Yoda and stuff, and they were working through that. They were having stuff that was like inspired visually by uh, how Ralph McQuarrie looked, stuff like that. And they finally got away from that of creating something a little bit different. But still, you have that fact that they were at the time like let's make another Yoda. Let's make a small diminutive character who's actually really wise. And I like how all the way back here we have somebody playing with that, but like really taking it in a new direction of like no, dinosaur, Yoda, but
Dinosaur.
dinosaur.
I hope we get to see a T-Rex Jedi Master though. That'd be awesome. Would,
Yes, see Rook Jedi.
yo, yeah,
Well, that's
yes.
Velociraptors, but yeah.
Yeah, make them. Yeah, make the Velociraptors Jedi because I feel like somebody else like. If, I feel like the cowards would make the Velociraptors Sith because Raptors are always the
Hmm.
bad guys. No, make this one a Jedi Master. Make him like the nicest Jedi Master ever. But no, yeah, you're right, and you know, and even I feel like Veitch plays a lot on what people thought at the time were going to be the prequels. And I'm not talking about the Clone Wars. Like, and we can talk about this later on, of course. But I do feel like Ulick is very much based off of Anakin Skywalker, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And how he fell to the dark side. Um,
There's a reason why later on, when the prequels start coming out, they make a concerted effort to parallel them with the
I mean, like with
Clone
the
Wars game.
oh yeah,
They
um,
literally meet.
that was cool. That was cool. Yeah, yeah, right. But no, you're absolutely right. And it's just really cool to see this era. I've always said '90s Star Wars is like you know, hit and miss, sure, but I genuinely do always love it just for that kind of like, wow, this is a time period. This is very much this is a time. Um, yeah, I feel you, chosen Night Wolf. We hear you. But so let's just get started. I we talked a little bit about our overall thoughts, but like, what did you think of like the story? Like, I guess let's start with just the Alderaan arc, and then we Onderon arc, and like we'll go to Nomi. We'll kind of treat them as two things. What were just your overall thoughts on the Onderon stuff? Just kind of that's sort of an intro to this era, as just the story itself, as setting up for the future. What were your thoughts?
Onderon is interesting because, well, it is funnily enough sort of like Phantom Menace.
Hmm.
We're like, hey, we have a dispute going on these planets. The Jedi are coming in to deal with it, and they get attacked, and then they find out that there's more going on, and you have the Beast Riders kind of like the Gungans. They're misunderstood. Like you have a lot of Phantom Menace in this, weirdly enough.
Oh my gosh, you're. I was reading it like you're right. I didn't recognize that, but like, oh yeah, it is kind of like Phantom Menace.
Veitch creates a lot of stuff first. He's the first person to create a female Jedi, Vima Sunrider, back in the Dark Empire stuff. He's the
Hmm.
first to create an alien Sith, if I'm remembering correctly. And he creates the double bladed lightsaber. Exar has the double bladed lightsaber like 4 years before Phantom Menace.
I've always said, and no disrespect to Star Wars novels, of course, I love a lot of them, but I've always said that I feel like if any media, in terms of books and comics, had an influence on what we see on screen, comics probably will always have a higher one because a it's visual, and
Mm-hmm.
also I think George just liked comics. I think if there's one medium he did like, it was the comic books.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Uh,
Ayla Sakura gets used in Attack of the Clones because he sees a Twi'lek and he's like, I like that. He just sees the cover and he's just like, yeah, put her in the movie.
yeah. I mean, it's the visual design. But no, you're right. That I would. What do you think of like this the characters as well and like the overall
Yeah,
story?
I like how it immediately goes to we don't know much about the Jedi. We've never had a story where the Jedi are in full force, and so we're gonna go back and right away have people training under a Jedi Master and going on a mission, and sort of seeing why the Jedi were important, why they were the guardians of peace and justice and all that, and we
Hmm.
have early Republic stuff, and so it's immediately interesting and fun for that reason. I do think the the like internal stuff with Onderon starts to become a little weak when it's revealed that the whole conflict is just because of Freedom Ad. Uh,
Yeah.
that that definitely is disappointing. Because I mean the whole history lesson we get is very cool. I love that
Hmm.
stuff of getting the flashbacks of how Onderon developed as a civilization and how like Isis, the main city, forms and all of that stuff.
Hmm.
But then it just being, oh, Friedenad showed up, and that's when the Beast Riders happened. Maybe that was a little bit beforehand, and the modern ones are just the outcome of people who were against Friedenad getting kicked out. But
Yeah, I guess I didn't quite. Did the city develop when Frida Nad was before Frida Nad, or did Frida Nad develop the city? That's
It developed beforehand, but it seems like the Beast Riders are what they are because they're people who were cast out by Friedenad. Though I
ah.
don't know if I mean in the first issue they do say that for a long time the people who were cast out just got killed,
Mm-hmm.
and that it wasn't until later that they started to like actually fight back against the beasts and form their own civilization. Which I think the implication then is that that's because they were like not just criminals but good people, so they were able to be successful, which is kind of disappointing if that is more of what it is instead of just hey they cast out people and they formed their own civilization and developed a culture and stuff instead of it being the good people who were against free nag get kicked out and continue civilized society elsewhere.
Civilized age. Yeah, it does seem like. I guess it wasn't like Onderon was messed up before Frida Nad, and then Frida Nad just made it more messed up. Uh
Mhm.
just seems like Onderon was pretty okay, and then Frida Nad showed up, and then it became messed up. No, I get you. And then the royal family's like got that Frida Nad evil in them. Um, which we will get into some other time. But yeah, Frida Nad building his Sith tombs where Saw Gerrera can 1,000 years later hide in, thus beginning the rebel tradition of hiding in Sith tombs, not where.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I'll just, I do generally like the history though, and I even like Frida Nad. Frida Nad's
Oh, it's
interesting.
great.
Yeah. It's always kind of funny though reading how they describe Frida Nad because sometimes they just call him a Jedi, and other times they say a Sith, and it's sort of like, and there's some like interesting debates on like, is he part of the Sith lineage? Is he not? Like, um, I mean, I like Frida Nad as a Sith regardless, but it's sort of like, um, it's just sort of funny. It's like those early years where it's like we're not quite sure what the bad guy terms are just yet. He's a Sith. He's a dark Jedi. He's just a Jedi, but he's evil. He's the dark side, the
Yeah.
dark power of the Sith.
And the Friedenad uprising sort of starts to clarify that. I mean, we don't get really anything additional about Friedenad's backstory, really, but that does. Or wait, we do have the holocron scene here, which sets up the idea of like when we have
Mhm.
Odiner talking in that holocron about how the Sith came about. He
Mhm.
specifically is saying like, and I'm ashamed to admit many of them were Jedi, which sort of sets up the idea of not even just one group of cast out Jedi becoming the Sith, but over the centuries, over the millennia, a lot of Jedi have become Sith or Darksiders and stuff.
Right.
And so it's like when they realize that Friedenad is a former Jedi, which the second issue of Friedenad Uprising sort of more cements, that's like, oh, he's dangerous. He's not just some magician guy. He was trained by the Jedi and it is a Jedi who went rogue.
Right. It was funny actually because it was like I was actually on looking around some stuff and like there is um there is some debate on whether or not Naga Sadao was ever Frida Ned's master or not because like apparently a source book that says unnamed Sith master, but then the comics almost seem to make it out that it was Naga Sadao who was Frida Ned's Sith master. So there's some discrepancies about that. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's the whole maybe he's a self-taught Sith. Um, but no, I really like it. And I like even just the idea of like he's a Sith, but he never really like formed a giant Sith empire like a Revan or a Vitiate or even the ancient Sith. He just kind of like he found this place and he's like, I'm just gonna conquer it. This is my house. I'm just gonna take this one little planet. Just be a little Sith king. Um, which is cool instead of going the whole big empire galactic dominance thing, which Exar Kun's gonna do later on. Um, But I really like Onderon. I think it's a really interesting um it's an interesting civilization. The Beast Riders are cool, even though I guess I can agree with that. Um, yeah, I really like just it's cool to seeing what people thought Jedi were as well. Like, uh, it's funny though. It's like Master Arca has two Padawans when later on we're like, nope, you only have one.
There's
Uh,
three,
that's three. Like, yeah, train three students at once. That can go.
two of which are brothers. I'm sure
Yeah,
this won't backfire at all.
no, it won't. It'll be fine. Be fine. One's very much a hothead. Well, I don't know. I don't think he looks like a hothead. Well, he kind of is. He's brash.
Hmm.
He's certainly brash for sure. Um, but yeah. I mean, he's. I guess they very much wrote him to be like Anakin, or what they thought Anakin would be. Um, I guess then you look at his brother were being written as like proto Obi-Wan and Anakin, I guess, right? Like brother Jedi, and then one's gonna follow the dark side. And, um, I
Yeah,
don't.
I mean, with Ulik, I think a lot of it is sort of like if Luke didn't get humbled by being defeated by Vader in Cloud City, where Luke just rushes off to be heroic and everything.
Right.
And because Ulik is in a position of greater power and there's more Jedi to bail them out and everything, his
Mhm.
mistakes of jumping the gun and getting involved in a war on the wrong side, uh, he gets bailed out of that, yes, but he keeps having these moments where he's sent on missions. He's not fighting a singular enemy, and that's how he
Right.
gets out of his depth eventually with the craft cultists.
Right. Those guys will come later. Um, that's another thing about Veitch. He kind of repeats his stories a little bit, where it's like all the people who follow the dark side are always trying to like infiltrate it from within. Um,
Hmm.
and it's sort of like, guys, this never works. You always screw up. It never works. Um, yeah, it's always interesting. Again, I just love Veitch's tone and his ideas. Like, if we ever do Dark Empire, like, we got to talk about how he portrays the Emperor as like more than just a Sith and stuff like that. It's ridiculous, but it's great. Um, so they go to Onderon, all that stuff happens. Um,
It
I
is
love
funny
how
how the Jedi are enforcers in this. Like, they do kind of just get sent around to involve themselves in a civil war and win it because the Republic wants. Like, it's funny how the Republic early on is. I mean, honestly, it's kind of how the Republic will continue to be, but sort of corrupt or not necessarily the good guys in the sense that they want a thing finished so that they can incorporate that planet into things. Like, you're not going to ask the Beast Riders if they consent to being part of the Republic. We're just going to deal with them because this planet wants to be in the Republic or this faction.
this planet's absolute monarchy seems nice.
Hmm.
They don't look all evil and dark sidey, and their advisors look very sinister looking. Um, their poor Twi'lek Fred just gets beaten, like
Yeah.
space racism already.
Which someone in the letters pages is like, Uluk and Kay are too brash for trying to immediately start a fight to defend him. And the editor is like, yeah, but that's kind of the lesson that Kazarka had said, don't be so quick to jump into fights. And I'm like, okay, but like, yeah, first of all, that person has bad media literacy to be like, well, we just had Ulik get told that he's too brash, and then he acts brash. Like, yeah, he has to learn a lesson. But also, it's like, they literally are doing a hate crime on his brother, essentially. Makes
yeah,
sense why they would pull out their lightsabers.
yeah, dude, like they're mad about the space racism. No good. Um, I would too. I love, by the way, the designs of like classic lightsabers.
Hmm.
Like they're so janky, but in like this crystal almost like flames, but it's cool. I
They're
like the
huge.
I
They
know.
look like freaking baseball bats.
And the over the top armored cloak robes.
That was the most exciting thing for me when we saw in the Doctor Aphra comic when they did uh when they started setting up like ancient Jedi stuff and Aphra picks up a lightsaber and it is just huge. And she remarks on that, and I'm just like, yes, somebody knows Tales of the Jedi. This thing is just you know
yeah.
absurd.
I mean that's how a lot of it's I feel like that's how technology if you want to if you want to make Star Wars realistic, just make everything ancient big and then as time goes on it gets smaller. Um like a computer. Um but no, that's awesome. I love the designs. Um,
Mm.
I love also that the advisors, like again, like as we talked about how like everything feels like Star Wars, even though with a different skin. It's like the Queen's like female Palpatine, and the advisors they got the pink hats and the big robes, the big hats and the pink robes.
Yeah,
It's like Empire on a smaller scale, almost.
and we got like a lot more fantasy stuff.
Hmm.
Like we have obviously like the Isis is this giant medieval looking castle thing city, but I mean they do make a point of it because you have like modern guns. I forget what they call them, like ray guns or something like that. But like they kind of developed their own equivalent of blaster cannons and stuff, and they have modern looking tech, but they have it meshed with like guys with ceremonial spears, which it's like the golden age of the Sith stuff gets a little absurd with the mixing of high tech and low tech. I think this stuff does a much more consistent job,
Hmm.
especially with the Nomi issues where the tech is a lot more kind of consistent, less all over the place in terms of design.
Some of it's just the same design from Return of the Jedi, like the Sun Barge. Um, But yeah, all right, I agree. I love the fantasy of Tales of the Jedi, right? Like that's the thing about '90s Star Wars again that I love. It's like you go the post Endor era, which has a more tilt towards science fiction, and then Tales of the Jedi coming out, and that is very much high fantasy. Your kings and your queens, um, and your knights. I mean, it's again funny. You're talking about the Jedi being enforcers. I was listening to someone talk about Lee Brackett's Empire Strikes Back script. It wasn't called Empire Strikes Back, which is the Star Wars sequel. Um, and the Jedi in that, at least that draft early on, very Arthurian knights. Like Luke even takes like a pledge of the knights and he uses like thou and stuff like that. So I feel like I mean, I guess my question is like, how do you feel about like the portrayal of the Jedi, especially compared to like the modern times, in terms of just like what the Jedi are supposed to be? Do you think it meshes pretty well? Do you think it's a bit more knighty than
It
warrior monks?
it fits a lot with what people thought the Jedi were at the time,
Hmm.
and it kind of shows why I think Lucas's vision of the Jedi is way more sensible. Because it's like you just have, I mean, they have the whole thing of like Jedi Watchmen, which I do like. It's like this is the early Republic. Hyperspace. I mean, we even get that in the first issue of like hyperspace travel is new.
Right.
And we get that with Nomi's first issue as well, with issue 3, where they're like there are hubs. You don't go from planet to planet. You go from hubs within systems. Uh, but because of that, you have Jedi are more scattered. They repeatedly are described as a brotherhood of Jedi
Hmm.
Knights. They're not an order really.
Hmm.
Uh, though I think order is from the original trilogy is used, but it's a brotherhood here more than anything. Uh, And yeah, you have the Jedi Watchmen, which is a cool concept of like a Jedi per system, more or less. On them doing missions, but they're sort of just there's not an actual demand you kind of just ask, "Hey, can you help with this thing? Can you help with that?" Uh, and yeah, it's like the Republic asked some Jedi, and they all kind of just use their own. They discern on their own. So it's like, another Jedi might have not only handled the situation differently, but been like, "Hey, let's not support one side in a civil war," or something. Like, there is no standard thing. It's like the Republic can just ask whichever Jedi. Imagine if they ask like specific Jedi who they know will do something versus
Mm-hmm.
others who wouldn't. Uh, and yeah, it definitely makes a difference between that and the prequels, but you can kind of almost see, like I always say, of like every Jedi purge or fall creates the basis for the next Jedi Order as a response to it. Where you definitely get that here, where you get scattered Jedi who don't necessarily handle situations that well,
Mm-hmm.
uh, masters who have multiple apprentices, and so they're not as involved in the training. Like they people can complain about dogma, but a lot of what goes wrong throughout this stuff is a lack of dogma or discipline. They
No,
kind
I
of kind
mean,
of just let an entire civilization or let two entire civilizations be a test for their students.
yeah, that's one thing about Master Arca I kind of raised my eyebrow about, and I like the character and where he
Mhm.
goes. It's like, dude, you sure you want to give these two like the super important mission? Maybe some supervision would be nice.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, Lot's there. Lot is there to be supervision. The poor guy just does not get a chance.
yeah, and even like Master Arca at the end is like, he goes to you look, it's like, you look, you got brash, you screwed up. And he's like, but I'm like Master Arca, you sent them kind of like into the deep end here, dude. Um, like he's like, even Obi-Wan knows not to send Anakin to certain places, when he was training. Um, but no, I agree. It's interesting how I feel like later materials have tried to find like a weird balance between like what we get in Tales and the prequels, especially showing the past. Um, uh, in terms of like a bit more uniformity. And centralization. Because like in I think the Freedom Nat uprising, there's gonna be like a Jedi conclave where it's like, okay, that's how the Jedi all get together. Um,
Mhm.
and like that's how like they get more official compared to like what we know today, where it's like, yeah, there is a Jedi Order, there is a Jedi Council that kind of oversees things from Coruscant on Central Command here. Even in times when the Jedi are a little bit more loosey goosey, there's still like a central authority. Yoda's
Yeah,
still
they have a Vatican.
Yoda, as we all like to joke on Ion Cannon. Yoda's Jedi Pope. He wears the big hat. Uh, the green mist, the Grandmaster.
Yeah, he has a special chair,
He does.
like
He
the
got.
Pope Mobile.
It's true. He does. Yoda has the Yoda mobile. Uh, now just imagine Yoda on the balcony waving. Yes. But yeah, yeah. It's very. I like that. Uh, what did you make of the villains themselves? I mean, I know you were a little disappointed about like, oh, just evil dark side, but what did you make of the, I don't want to call it the Empress, but it's the Queen Amanoa, and like kind of, I guess, the portrayal of the dark side as well during this time, because like that's another thing about Veitch which is interesting, and kind of how he portrays not just the dark side but like the bad guys themselves, where it's like, I feel like Queen Amanoa and then later King Omen and even Palpatine, weirdly, I feel like in Veitch's version of Palpatine are Darksiders who I don't feel like are Sith. Palpatine's a whole other thing we can get into one day. But like you got Queen Amanoa clearly using some dark side machinations, but she's not a Sith Lord. But I feel like she probably could do the Force lightning. She doesn't. Neither does King Omen later. But um, again, it's that interesting dichotomy compared to what we get eventually with the prequels, where it's like, okay, these are what the Sith are. Here are other non-dark side users. Um, because it's sort of interesting of like they're acolytes, but I feel like they're very powerful acolytes in some ways.
Yeah, I think back then there was more of a decisive thing for Dark Lord of the Sith. Uh, like Anderson had to ask George, uh, would Exar Kun be Dark Lord of the Sith or a Dark Jedi? And George decided on Dark Lord of the Sith,
Mhm.
which is when that sort of becomes a thing again.
Right. Does this book? Because I always know. Eventually, I know. Eventually, they always say there can only be one Dark Lord of the Sith at a time. But is it this book or is that the actual book, Dark Lords of the Sith? Like, when does that?
So I was confused by that because there's a letter at the end of one of these that makes a point about they say like I might be misremembering this, but isn't there a thing about Vader being the 12th Dark Lord of the Sith? And I have no idea where that comes from. That always stands out to me, and I was trying to look up if that was from anywhere. But
That might be from Empire's End because in Empire's End, Palpatine goes to Korriban to get his clone body healed, and then the ghosts are like, "Now we ain't helping you," and they're like, "Hey, Vader's throne's empty. You want to join us, Palpatine?" Vader
you're right. I
didn't.
think that is where that might come from, because Ulick is the Ulick is the 11th lightsaber on the first issue, which is sort of a fake out because it ends up being Exar Kun,
Mhm.
and he's his apprentice.
Right.
But in a lot of ways, he kind of, for the time, he sort of was the last one before Vader. It's not until much later that we get the idea of other Dark Lords of the Sith between the two.
That's
It would be like a
fascinating.
decade of stories before that would happen.
That's fascinating. Let me check when the Empire's End that came out. Uh, but I mean that'd be 97. So yeah, that's when this is all over. Um, that's fascinating because I just kind of that idea of like, yeah, Exar Kun was the last Dark Lord. 4,000 years pass, and then that term comes again when Anakin decides to go the dark side. Um,
Hmm.
and then the Emperor is whatever the Emperor is. Um, so um, I kind of always got the impression that Veitch thought the Emperor was just a politician who, once he got political power, he's like, now I'm going to go into dark wizardry. That's my new hobby. Um,
Yeah, or
but
almost like the dark side corrupts like people who are important, which is what it kind of does with Omen and everyone. Like,
yeah, and
which
Amanoa.
almost is what Rise of Skywalker does to some extent.
Well, I mean, Palpatine already is decaying.
Well, I mean, like the sort of implication in Rise of Skywalker on its own that like Palpatine is all the Sith, like it's more like one spirit.
I always kind of took that more just Palpatine being just his flamboyant self. Um,
Yeah, though I do think that was probably more literal initially,
I could see
especially
that.
because it's sort of the case with the original draft, Duel of Fates, where we sort of imply that Plagueis might not have been his master or whatever, like that ancient Sith Lord.
Torvallum.
Was
I thought
yeah,
I always forget Torvallum was his Sith master or Torvallum was Plagueis' Sith master.
Torvallum says, "I do not know that name" when Kylo says Plagueis.
Okay, yeah. I
So
mean
there's sort of an
that's
implication that Palpatine might be more ancient than we think, or something like that.
and also even that idea goes back to the Bane trilogy, where it's like, did Bane put himself in Xana? And well, that doesn't sound right. Put his spirit in that. His spirit is now.
Yeah, and people have theorized about that for a long time. I've always just liked that because I'm a Xana stan, but yeah, it definitely makes some sense.
Well, there is something interesting in this comic of like, Queen Aminoa is asking Frida Nad's spirit, which is interesting because like that's when Cis ghosts were a lot more allowed to happen. Hey,
Hmm.
give me your dark side power from beyond the grave. Ooh. And then like Frida Nat's like, I'm going to give you my dark side powers. Here you go. My tomb is using my evil. Um, but yeah, I get to get back to the question. What did you think of the Queen Amidala as our antagonist for the day?
I liked having this like decrepit uh aristocrat person
Mm-hmm.
as the villain, and sort of having the Jedi accidentally be on the wrong side of the conflict to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she doesn't get that much to do because we do spend a lot more time thinking the Beast Riders are the enemy, at least at
Right.
first.
Yeah, I will say the weaker characters are probably, at least in my opinion, the princess, and her husband to
Hmm.
be, who I guess are like, again, to go back to like Veitch kind of recycling Star Wars a little bit. Leia and Han to a certain extent. If Han was a Beast Rider rebel rogue, um, eh, I mean they're fine, they're fun. I got
Hmm.
nothing really for them. The Beast Riders are cool themselves. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, oh, it's kind of cool, like seeing like again the kind of fantasy of like Beast Riders with spears versus technology, but it's assaulting the castle. Uh,
yeah, that whole fight is really, really interesting.
that is really cool. What do you think of like some of the designs of like the almost proto stormtroopers looking dudes, and some of the just the Aziz officials that kind of like quasi imperial a little bit.
Yeah, the uniforms throughout this, again, it's the thing of like, I think that's part of why I was disappointed with the Sith, the later Sith stuff, because the designs are just so kind of just take like a generic ancient real world thing and just be like, hey, it's in Star Wars now. Whereas here, there's a lot of cool mixing. Like I really like that there's a consistent emblem for Onderon and its military that you see throughout.
Hmm.
That becomes more relevant later when you realize it's a freedom ad symbol. But like, yeah, the guards have those weird helmets, and then
Hmm.
that like the royal guards. But then in the greater city, there's these almost more imperial army looking guys with the gray uniforms. Uh, and yeah, it's neat how there's a lot of consistency throughout, despite the fact that this series. I mean, I think the first two issues are both by Chris Gossett, but like throughout the arcs, there's a lot of different artists. But I like how there's a lot of consistency for designs for at least the people,
Hmm.
even if not necessarily for the ships.
No, I agree. Like I like some of the I like more of the ground design. The ship designs are fine. They don't stand out to me. Um,
The Nebulon Ranger, I will never be able to understand what is what. It's so weird and it's so lanky, and I don't know how it lands. It looks different in every single panel, and it stands out because when you get to the Nomi Sunrider stuff, that stuff's a lot more consistent. Uh, and the ships are like a lot more Star Warsy. They're less out there. They sort of nail a nice, like primitive Star Wars design.
mhm. Yeah, you can definitely tell they're getting they're trying they're dipping their toe in the water. They're dipping their little toes in the water, just trying to figure themselves out. In terms of like what's Star Warsy enough, what's not too derivative, what's ancienty enough, but not what's not too wild. I feel you. Um,
Hmm.
I guess before we wrap up kind of the stuff, what would you think of Master Arca? I really like Master Arca, even though I feel like, dude, you got you got to do better with your students here, buddy. But he stands out. He's like kind of a weird mix of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon a little bit, but like again, like you said, like Veitch is way better with his characters, so I remember some of these people a lot more than even like Naga Sadao or Ludo Kresh. Although I like those two quite a lot.
Yeah, Arca gets to be flawed and make mistakes, which comes up more later, but
Mhm.
he's sort of your beginning introduction to this thing throughout Village of like masters failing their apprentices, which
Mhm.
is a through line for
Right.
him. Uh and so yeah, Arca I do really, really like. I like the design. He looks different and distinct, despite essentially being human. I don't think he is a mere Lucan or anything.
I think he's just an old guy, but he's
Is he
very.
blind? I've always his eyes are like very milky.
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe I don't remember if he was.
Yeah,
Um,
with the ship designs, like when you get to the Nomi stuff, that insect ship, I just absolutely love the 2-page spread of that. Uh, in issue 4, with the giant insect flying through space. That like they carved out the carapace and like or the exoskeleton and attached to this the colossal wasp, and they just attached engines and
yeah,
stuff. And there's a whole description of how they went about that, and how that's useful. It makes everything seem much more dangerous for this era. Like they have to go through using a giant bug to make ships, and like the ones that are attacking it
mhm.
are cartoonishly little bugs as well with pincers that pierce into the ship. And it's like, really, do they have to look like that? But it works because there is like a consistency to the design between the two of them.
Yeah,
The raiders.
yeah. That is one thing I think to go back to we talked about earlier. Something that I'm glad to be seeing making a comeback in terms of like ancient what Star Wars the past story should do. And this is something I hope like they really like they can maybe even get with if they would do the Dawn of the Jedi movie. Is travel should be hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, High Republic has gotten a little bit in that with Phase 2, where it's like, yeah, travel is not just because that's like 200 years even after before this Phase 1, where it's like, yeah, travel's not just you can't just get to Coruscant and to Mustafar in a day. It's like now you gotta make pit stops and messaging takes forever, and you can't just hologram someone out like, hey, how's it going all the way core if you're in the Outer Rim. It's like, no, you gotta like send droids to like record a message, send the droid out, hope the droid makes it. It's like flow mail. Um, and I think and it's cool. Like Kel Jai again being a lot of Star Wars first. Um, they really kind of hit the idea. Like, yeah, traveling should be hard. They're the Galactic Republic, but it's not super centralized because it's hard to get around. Um,
Yeah, and all the little lore we get for the Stennis system with
yeah,
like them competing with people trying to buy the mineral rights and stuff. And like you have the Hut in an almost heroic position in issue 4 where he saves the miners transporting their stuff from pirates, and then
mhm.
he's like, now let's kill that Jedi because I want the sneaking crystals. But earlier it's like he's actually honorable to the people who are paying him for protection. And yeah,
Yeah,
like just that whole space battle is so fun.
yeah, it's just really good. I mean, I guess we're on the Nobi Sunrider stuff now. Um, what were your overall thoughts about just this compared to the Onderon stuff? I I feel I feel like I like the Onderon stuff more, but that's because I feel like I just like the Sith stuff. That's me. I'm the Sith fanboy, so like anything to get that. But I found the Nobi stuff interesting in terms of like also just seeing what a Jedi is like, and there's some interesting things with the Force going on. Um, and just seeing the wider galaxy, and obviously Triceratops Jedi Master, epic. But what were your thoughts overall on this part of the arc?
Yeah, it is a little padded.
Hmm.
It probably could have been 2 issues like with the Ulick stuff,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's nice how much of a character driven thing it is,
Hmm.
even if Nomi's conflict kind of just gets repeated a couple of times. Instead of
Yeah.
being like different trials, it is sort of the same thing brought up 3 or 4 times across them. But it is still, again, like much more personal, and there is some Jedi philosophy stuff going on there, even if it's a little bit like rougher than we would get later, or even in the original trilogy. Uh,
Mhm.
like there is no, there are always alternatives to fighting. Here, it's kind of always nope. There's always a fight. Uh, but do you have any thoughts on that stuff?
Yeah, that's the one weird one for me, where he's like, she almost like, I feel like in some way she's almost doing the Jedi thing of like, I'm never picking up that lightsaber ever again. And the Master Thrawn's like, no, you were right to fight because it was justice,
Mhm.
justice.
Yeah,
Um,
when she's like, I struck them down in vengeance, and he's like, no, it was just. It's like he's right that it was the correct thing to do, and she was defending their child, but like she's upset because she so quickly acted in such a violent manner that she had never done before. It's like it was morally correct what she did, but she was doing it also for the right reasons. But
Mhm.
the speed at which it's like Luke in the Last Jedi when Rey is searching the island with the Force and immediately goes to the dark area, and that's why he doesn't want to train her. He's just like, you went right to the dark side.
Like,
You went
yeah,
searching for it. Like that part of you is there, and that's not a good thing. And again, like on some level, it's like, okay, he's trying to get her to confront that because just ignoring it isn't going to make it go away. Which by the end of it, he does, like, it does actually become more of a Jedi lesson when he
mhm.
has the thing about like we can't do. I forget what he says specifically about the past, but he's like the because Nomi's husband is killed in front of her and their
And then
child, and she
becomes a
takes it
Force
like,
ghost next
yeah, really
second.
quickly. Though he does seem to disappear as a Force ghost, so it's like maybe it's just like as he's dying, he's
He gets
projecting
one.
into her head.
He gets one message. The Force allows, like, you can tell your wife one thing, but then you gotta go.
Hmm.
But no, yeah, it's interesting. I feel like she does that a few times. Where it's like, I never want to pick up this lightsaber ever again, and then she has to every time. Um, and obviously, you're right. It's she's not doing it like vengefully or vindictively. It's not like I'm not gonna kill for kill's sake. Yeah. Or it's not even like uh, what's that thing in the New Jedi Order? Something like lightning justice. It's
Oh yeah.
it's good with force lightning, but it still kills everybody. Um, but but it is a little, it's a little weird, a little the moral lessons are a little off, a little like, yeah, but like, knowledge and defense. That's what the Jedi are supposed to do. I mean, obviously, defend the people. If you see people getting attacked by pirates, yeah, ignite that lightsaber, do something.
It's like there's a discrepancy between what clearly her actual problem is and what he's saying, at least at first.
Hmm.
Where it's like he's diagnosing the wrong problem to some extent. Uh, and it's like you do get like good points. Like after we see the holocron stuff, and she's told that like you should take up a lightsaber because dark things are coming and the dark lords of the Sith are going to rise again and there's going to be all this death,
Hmm.
and she gets even more turned away from everything. Uh, and it's like overwhelmed. She turns her back on the alien Jedi Master. She will leave this terrible place. She will return to her homeworld and begin life anew. Master Thon seems to know her thoughts. I will tell you this, Nomi-san Rider. There is no going back for you. There is only going forward, or there is darkness. And it's like that is the right lesson. Like that is the that is a Jedi thing of like there you can't go back at all. That's been unleashed. That's been
Hmm.
the horrible things have happened. You have to confront it. Uh, or you fall to the dark side. It's the Anakin thing. It's why the Jedi forbid attachment, not necessarily not because they're cold or whatever, but because they have to be able to move beyond in a healthy manner.
Right. But speaking of attachment, I guess. this actually makes Nomi Sunrise very interesting as well because I find it kind of funny. You know, it's like her husband going to be a Jedi. It's like I feel like he's like, "Hey, honey, I got a job. I'm going to be a Jedi." I feel like in some ways it's almost feel like it's treated like a career, and not like this big thing that's like life changing and important. Like, hey, honey, I got the interview. Yeah, we're gonna be a Jedi. We're gonna move into the new house. It's gonna be great. Um, and then it's like, well, yeah, I'm dead. You gotta take my new job now. Congrats. Oh, and
Mhm.
good luck raising the kid. It's not as
Yeah.
crass as in the book, but I just find it
Which
kind of
I
funny.
do love the stuff about like her being afraid of being alone.
Hmm.
Like every time her husband would go off to do Jedi stuff, and now
Yeah.
she doesn't want to be alone again. She doesn't want to have to lose people and shit. And it's like that stuff's all interesting. Like I was saying, Nomi is the one who gets the most characterization in this
Hmm.
series. She's definitely the most complex character, I would say. She continues to be throughout.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, it is interesting to see. We're at that period where Jedi is sort of a career, and uh, you have Jedi who get married. You have like the whole thing of her husband being like, you're strong in the Force naturally. Why don't you train? Well, he's just
Yeah.
like giving her like you should send in an interview to the council or whatever. Just see if we can get a job.
Yeah, you did a nice job. You got good force powers. We checked the midichlorians. You're good. Um, no, it is interesting.
How do
You
they
know,
afford the ship and everything? I guess Jedi probably get like a stipend or something, but it's
I mean, back then, I don't know, man. Like, what is it like the church? They get donations, help.
honestly probably.
Um, that's true. Yeah. Now that's great. Now that's the next. That's the EU story I want. I want the Jedi banking controversies.
The Jedi can't afford their stuff, so they sort of just shake people down, like save a planet, and the people are like, "We, you have our eternal thanks," and but you have okay. Your eternal thanks doesn't pay for starships.
Yoda reforms the Jedi Central Bank. The
Yoda
story.
just releases a villain back onto a planet. It's just like you didn't pay.
Yes. Yeah, but it is interesting. It's like it is kind of interesting, seeing a Jedi also be a single mother. Um,
Hmm.
which is a cool dynamic, and I like that. And it also just kind of shows the strength of Nomi's character throughout. Is that she has family, she has a child, but she doesn't. She eventually she can still raise her kid, be loving to her kid, but not go full on Anakin and like, oh, okay, no, I don't want to lose my kid and then follow the
See,
dark
I
side.
was gonna go the direction of she's not like Leia because she actually raises her damn kid.
That's true. It's like, she raises her kid. Yeah, she takes sure. He's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, it's dangerous taking her on the Jedi missions, but hey, um, she's trying to find the work life balance. Um, uh, a bit of a tangent, but something I'm curious if you have enough memory of. It's really interesting. I bet Veitch felt like he got a lot of freedom for this in a way he probably didn't with Dark Empire. For just in terms of like, because I see like the same plot lines again, like Luke and Ulick, same thing. Um, Even Palpatine is kind of like a lot of his villains in this. Not less like Kaisar Kun, but more like Queen Amanoa and King Omen.
Reading that as well, yeah.
And Frieda Nad. Um, but it's sort of like I don't know necessarily in terms of like Tom Veitch getting constrained by proto whatever story group at the time was to a certain, but it's
So
but you can tell
so
like
Veitch
okay, go ahead.
Veitch answered that a few times. So he said, well, when he was asked back in like 2002, uh, were core characters and even secondary characters your creation or Lucasfilms? I assume you're allowed a certain degree of freedom in developing some of the characters as you saw fit. And his answer was to the first answer. we made it all up, and Mr. Lucas gave his approval. I can't remember if he rejected anything. In fact, my first collaborator, Chris Gossett, had a lot to do with the first series. In that, I talked over my story ideas with him, and he did all the ship designs and
Ooh.
forth. I came up with the idea of a two-bladed lightsaber, which, as I recall, wasn't used until the third or fourth series.
Mm-hmm.
And like Jedi fighting with lightsaber in each hand and stuff is him. But he says throughout the stuff that like he came up with the idea and contacted Lucasfilm about doing it as a follow-up to Dark Empire. They said, "Oh, George will never go for this." Well, he loved the idea, of course. He gave us free reign to imagine the Star Wars universe of 4,000 years before Luke Skywalker. His only rule was that I had to submit my ideas to him for final okay. And you get a little bit of that in the letters pages as well. Essentially, they would submit stuff in, and you would. It was more like you wouldn't get feedback unless there was a thing that got vetoed or that George wanted
Mm-hmm.
a specific thing about.
Right.
And I know there's been stuff about like not being as involved as they thought, of like later realizing that they weren't being as they weren't as directly involved with Lucasfilm as they had realized or they'd wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you have like Veitch having his whole conflicts with Zahn, because Zahn was
Right.
just ignoring his stuff with Dark Empire, but he wanted to work with Zahn. I mean, Dark Horse sadly gets screwed over a lot. Dark Empire gets screwed over by the Thrawn trilogy. They pitch an invasion plot line. New Jedi Order happens. They get left hanging.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. It's too bad. But no, I mean that's good. That's good to know. I was curious if I had a different experience with this over Dark Empire. It doesn't sound like it. Just seems like he just got a lot more. He even got more freedom to do what he wanted.
Yeah, because Dark Empire, he was more going back and forth with George. Like he pitched story ideas directly to George for that. Like the Palpatine and stuff. I mean, George did veto that, and that's how he got the Vader part,
Right.
the Resurrect Vader. But like that seems more collaborative. Whereas I don't think there was as much of that on this. It
No.
was much more checklist.
Right. But although it's cool in how it all kind of comes back in Dark Empire 2 and even Empire's End, where it's like, Empire's End ends on Onderon.
Mhm.
Funny enough. But no, I was just curious about that. A little side tangent. But yeah, back to this. Back to the Nomi Sunrider stuff as well. Also, what's up with Nomi Sunrider's hair in the first
I
issue?
know it's so it does continue. It's just less pronounced. It's like she's balding, but there's one specific area that isn't for her forehead. It's I could never tell if that's supposed to be like a just weird Star Wars hair thing or if that's just a weird art thing. But it seems very intentional, especially early on.
It's probably a star. I assume it's a Star Wars hairstyle, but it's distracting. I mean, nothing against baldness, of course. But and it goes away later. She gets her hair full, kind of maybe it's like the culture they were a part of, and then she becomes a Jedi. She kind of lets it go, a little bit.
It's a weird version of a Padawan braid.
Yeah, exactly. Then once you become a master, you get your hair. Your hair can
And
go.
Obi-Wan and Anakin did sort of have fades.
They did. They did have fades. Um. Uh. But yeah. But we talked about him a bit earlier on. But what do we think about the epic Triceratops Jedi Master Thrawn? What are your thoughts on him?
He shouldn't be able to grip a lightsaber, and I love him because of it, even though he has a lightsaber. Like he's just absurd. It's great. He part of why I fell in love with Tales of the Jedi is because
Mhm.
it's a Star Wars version of the it's not Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, is it? Oh no, it's just Green Lantern Corps. Back in the 1980s, you had the Green Lantern Corps comics, which were more anthology, and they were about the actual Corps. And so you got a bunch of Green Lanterns people recognize now come from that, and ones who were one-offs became established characters. And so you would have like like that's where like Rotlop fan of the F sharp bell core that our friend Ian loves, that he did the whole
Yeah.
audio drama. Like that stuff comes from that of like just weird Green Lanterns. And you get sort of the equivalent of that with Tales of the Jedi, of just weird Jedi. Obviously with the Sith stuff, we got uh, what's his face, who was a head, or not a head, a brain
No, he was
in like
ahead.
a
He was ahead.
no, that was Simon, Darth Simon.
Oh, okay.
There's Ud Banar, isn't he like a
He
or no,
might.
Ud Banar's master, Orlu, I think, is like a brain with tentacles in like a jelly thing.
Yeah, everything I always hear about the Green Lanterns. I always feel like there's a lot of Jedi in them, isn't there? Some
Yeah, yep.
parallels.
There's just a
Uh,
bunch of like stuff with just the Order hanging out, and it's like the Osis is sort of like Oa, and so it's like yeah, it's so reminiscent, and I really like that.
yeah, Master Thrawn's interesting. He's also a little scary. Like,
Hmm.
he's got I feel like there's a lot of aggression in there. Like even like just the way the audio drama that I was listening to kind of talked about. He got like this gruff voice. It's like
Yeah,
and he
he's very
smokes.
passive aggressive. Also, he's
Yeah.
like, oh, your child isn't afraid, but you are.
And I also like he's also like the child's also my apprentice too.
Hmm.
Like what? Like who
Like,
decided
oh,
that?
well, you're gonna be a coward, but I'll train your kid one day.
Yeah, yeah. But that kid has quite the interesting life. I also like how he just appears and you think like the guy riding him is going to be the Jedi Master, and it's not.
Hmm.
Um, that's cool. That's obviously the Yoda twist of it all.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, it's literally the reverse. Luke has to give Yoda a piggyback ride. And here when we meet this guy, he's giving a piggyback ride to his apprentice. It's like literally a reversal.
you're right. It is. What did you think of I think it's in this. Is it in this story? The next one. There's a scene where, or maybe I'm getting my Tales of the Jedi mixed up. I apologize.
Is it
Where
the
like,
history scene?
yeah, the history scene. I think that's where we see like the Sith King looking dudes.
Yes, that is issue
Yep,
4.
there. No, it's actually issue 5. Uh,
Oh, oh yeah, it is issue 5. Yeah, that I go back to that so often. It's such a cool moment of just, hey, here's what the Sith and the Jedi are in universe historically. Uh, and David Roach just gorgeous gorgeous art for this. Uh, and yeah, we get that the history of the dark side, and we get sort of a lot more focus on like the dark side being like there being dark side civilizations everywhere, like Sith. There's a Sith civilization, but there's Darksiders and people who become Sith or who are adjacent to Sith all over the place.
yeah, that was interesting too. What are your thoughts on like the depiction of the dark side in these comics and how the Force works in general?
I think Veitch has a stronger understanding of the dark side than a lot of the EU writers in this
Hmm.
era. Like,
Hmm.
I think he might be the closest to Lucas, uh, honestly, out of everyone from the 90s, because he treats the dark side as aberrant, but also like there's the whole question of like there is that point Udbanar has about maybe we'll never be able to defeat the dark side, will always be there, but it's not in like a oh that is balanced way. It's like a
Right.
pessimistic thing where he's like maybe we won't be able to defeat it, maybe it will just like the dark things have been and will be. Uh or it's not known if civilized beings or Jedi Knights will ever be able to eliminate the dark side and its way. But it's like the one of the Jedi here is very much to fight it.
Right.
Not so much to serve the Republic even, but like to fight the dark side. as a malevolent force, which seems to be sort of self-aware.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Um, per se, especially or like, yeah, if a dark sider, like if a Sith Lord rises to power, go fight it, buddy. Don't be thinking about, oh, we defeated the evil, now there will never be evil. Like,
Hmm.
there's always probably gonna be evil, dude, but it's just still important to go fight this particular bad guy right now. Don't think too hard. But no, I agree. I've always liked Veitch's takes on the Force in general and the dark side. I almost would, and, I think, and in a lot of ways, what I like about, I really think it's interesting about Veitch, especially you see this with Dark Empire, especially with Luke. I, the dark side's like, it's not truly mind control, but there's something going on. It's like you can tell, like the dark side just messing with his head. Um,
Hmm.
um, we'll get into it later, but there are some things of like Ulick's fall, which I do find a little questionable about. Like, I feel like they almost act a little too much like the Sith poison is the problem.
Hmm.
And like it's like there's dark side in his blood and it's making him do evil things compared to like what we will see with like Anakin, where it's like, no, Anakin still made his choice. He didn't have like Sith blood transfused into him or something.
Yeah.
Um, although it is funny with like with Luke, it's like they didn't do that with Luke. Well, with Luke, it's more like he thought he could control himself, and then it's like, oh nope, I actually did follow the dark side for reals. My bad. Um, I mean that's what I like about his
Luke
Palpatine.
has to do a hologram message with ukulele music, and he does an apology video.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, I fell the dark side. I made a whoopsies. Um, but no, I
He
mean,
still
like,
monetizes it.
yeah. Um, but I mean, like that's what I like about Palpatine. It's like, Palpatine. He just goes all out with Palpatine in terms of like, is Palpatine even a human, or just some
Is
Eldritch
Palpatine
being?
even Palpatine? Like, at what point does the self end and it just becomes the hunger for? I mean, we got that with Nihilus later.
Yeah, that's true. Or even like a little bit with Frida and Nad, as well.
Hmm.
In terms of like just the dark side manifest as this dude. Um, but no, I agree compared to like some of the books where it's like, I feel like the dark side in the novels. Well, I can really only reference the Thrawn trilogy. Really is. I just feel like it's just all the Force, and then sometimes
Yeah,
some people can use Sith lightning, and then other times it's just like Luke's just using telepathy.
yeah. Like Luke is very confused. Like Luke just doesn't suspect anything is wrong with Jorah Sabayoth. Uh,
Right.
takes him way too long, and we get like Luke. So to anyone who seems Jedi adjacent, Luke is like, "Oh, this is a Jedi. This is good." Like when he meets Waru, it's like just this all powerful being. He's just like, "Oh, he must be good." Because he's sort of using the Force. There's no like the dark side isn't really part of the equation there, even though he will talk about it a bunch.
Right. Like even with Sabayoth, it's like, oh, Sabayoth seems nice. He's living in this fancy castle and a big throne. Not suspicious at all. Uh, where it's like here, it's like the dark side feels like the dark side. It's like there's spooky spirits and ghosts and satanic rituals.
Yeah,
Uh,
like it exists on planets sometimes just out of nowhere, like with Embera, I think it is the planet Master Thon is on.
right. I mean, they go
Because
that like
Aphra
that pit, that dark.
yeah, the Lake Craft, I think it is, or Calf, that like he's pushed the dark side into one location.
It's the equivalent of the dark side cave, isn't it?
Yep, yep, and Bane will come back to this place.
Yeah, I mean, like the dark side, like leaves an imprint. It's like even like Korriban's. You never want to live on Korriban, even with the Sith gone. It's like that place is always going to be spooky as heck. Um,
Hmm.
there's always going to be something messed wrong with it. That would be something cool to see eventually, though, in a story. And I don't think Tales ever does it. Sadly, it was like taking a dark side planet, but like just purging it to the dark side. Like
Well, that is what Thrawn is trying to do.
that's true, right?
The Jedi do that in canon with Coruscant, but then again, it was originally a light side thing, so it's not exactly the same.
Well, they put
The
the
Sith
temple over
was,
the shrine,
yeah, and the Sith shrine was only put up after it fell, right?
right?
So it had already been a Jedi temple.
They have to put a giant Jedi temple over Korriban, just over to put it over the tombs. Um, that could go well. But no, I like that a lot. What did you think of? I guess I mean you talked about it a bit earlier, but like, what did you think of like the hut? I personally thought I didn't notice the honorable connection, but maybe I was just a little too distracted by the comic pairing of like, oh, he's kind of a little like Jabba, but he actually speaks basic. Um,
Mhm.
in the audio drama, he actually speaks basic. It's just the Jabba voice, but in English. The whole time. But I don't know. Like, I am like not the. It just this is where I feel like it got a little too derivative. Where it's like it's just Jabba's gang. It's even the same designs and the same
Yeah, it's the
aliens
same
too.
species.
Same species, and it's like, well, and here here unfortunately starts Star Wars, this big thing of like all Huts are gangsters. Even 10,000 years ago, that Hut's a gangster. Um,
Yeah, like we have I do love that line of like, I swear, my life is yours, and I will do whatever to serve any hut. He's like, whoa, well, let's just say every hut, just me. Like, don't you be serving like my uncle or whatever is gonna screw me over.
yeah. But
Though
yeah,
these comics do eventually give us a good guy hut, who
that's
is the
true.
most sympathetic character in all of these.
And he gets screwed over and dies.
Poor guy.
I know. Um, but yeah, this is for like of the two arcs for me. I like the Nomi Sunrider stuff, and I like her arc. It's just I like the Underworld stuff a little bit better. Um, but Master Thon is awesome, and Nomi Sunrider is great, and I like that she finds her. It's an arc about her finding her courage. Really, like by the end, she's like kind of ready.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess and we can talk about this again when we get to the other stuff. Do you think she gets lost in the later issues, though? I feel like once she enters the Ulick and XR and stuff, she gets a little lost in the shuffle.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we keep adding Jedi characters as part of it. Uh, and I mean, like the main female lead moving forward is mostly that Cathar character. I forget her name right now, but the one who's very angry at Ulick for turning to the dark side, and like redemption becomes about like she's the one who needs to be convinced that Ulick can be redeemed, not Nomi. Nomi's sort of just along for the ride, and it's like, yeah, she does sort of fall by the wayside. I think part of that is because she went through her full arc already, and so they just didn't do much with her from that.
It's also written by Kevin J. Anderson, apparently, Redemption.
Hmm.
Veitch never it's kind of interesting that he never that the Veitch kind of I don't want to say Veitch lost his series because I'm sure it was amicable, but it's like he does the first 2 to 3 arcs and then Kevin J. Anderson takes the rest. I'm curious why he didn't finish it off.
Yeah,
Um,
I forget how long Veitch was writing moving forward, like when he stopped writing comics.
um, yeah. Oh, here's a good question. Uh, from Matthew. Hi, Matthew, if you're listening. Like, we've always asked this. Like, if we ever go back to this period, like, how much would we like to see kind of coming from this book? Like, obviously, a lot. Like, there obviously we got the double blade lightsaber that's already come back. But like, what elements do you think would really work for like newer stuff? And maybe like, what would you like to see like get? not adapted like character wise, but like ideas and concepts to come back if they haven't
Uh,
already.
I would definitely want a lot more like Jedi being like the Jedi Watchmen thing. I think would be nice to see more of.
Hmm.
Seeing Jedi more isolated and sort of frontier stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like we're seeing that a little bit, but I still feel like the Jedi of that time are still more centralized, even if they're still on the frontier. But like, yeah, even more so. Like, 'cause I feel like Master Arca, Ulick, and Kay are like so. They probably barely cocked Coruscant or wherever Jedi HQ is, if there is a Jedi HQ. It's like they feel like they're just doing their thing on their little temple, far off from civilization. Um, Sometimes they get a call from a local senator. That would certainly be interesting to see as well. Like just full on Jedi, decentralized, doing their own thing. Um, but yeah, to get back to our point, yeah, Tales of the Jedi is interesting. Just overall, kind of starting from here and how I like that it's an anthology that is telling a overarching narrative, and I think it's fine. I don't hate. I mean, I don't hate it. I love it. I love it. I love everything about it. But at the same time, I do feel like I don't care if this is like planned, but it does feel like outside of Ulick Keldroma, um, there isn't much, and Nomi to a certain extent, there isn't much of a core cast, or it's a core cast that just kind of is there, but no longer the focus. Like
Yeah, I
once XR is the villain, Frida Nad just gets forgotten.
yeah, I think a lot of that is because this isn't like a single series.
Hmm.
It is and part of this is because Dark Horse operates differently than most comic companies, especially back then,
Hmm.
where like the Ula Quildroma stuff, those first two issues were written, and then he was told to write more stuff. So the next three issues were written after they were an additional thing. It wasn't supposed to be one of five when he was originally scripting. And everything after that fact, you have like two issues for Freedom Uprising, and then a certain amount of issues. They did stuff in mini series, not ongoing titles. Dark Horse very rarely, especially in the '90s, had an ongoing.
Right. I mean, since like the 2000s, they get an ongoing with Republic Comics.
Hmm.
Um, because that was like the mainline Star Wars comic that eventually became Dark Times later on. Um, but yeah, that would explain it because like it builds off each other, but at the same time, I do feel like it's like if this were truly a big epic story, I feel like the Ulick and Nomi stuff would be more intertwined. Exar Kun would probably be there from the beginning. Frida Nat, I guess, would be your Emperor bigger bad, to some extent. Um, with- uh, and then you obviously got the Omen family. I'm just gonna call them the Omen family. They kind of just come and go, and then you got the cousins. And we'll get into the cousins next time because they're weird. Uh, uh, like yeah, cousins. I feel like they're more than cousins. Um,
Well, they
and
are royalty.
yeah, shit. Oh, that's true. Oh, yeah, that's true. And hey, yeah, Vicky and Al highlight of romance. Um, but yeah, and it just and then like when you get to Sith War, it's like the Mandalorian shows up. Not our Mandalorian, but the Mandalore,
Mandalore.
Mandalore. Um, that
Mandalore,
the
I forget
ultimate.
what he is. Yeah, it might be. Or I think Mandalore the Ultimate was the one who fought Revan. Though that might have been the same one, actually.
No, because that one dies, and then the guy who's the alien continues on the Mandalore tradition.
Mm.
And that's the one who fights Revan. But yeah, yeah. Oh, you know what? That actually, that's all. Let me make that our final point for the night. How do you just overall feel about how Tales was handled in the wider sense of the lore and how they built off this stuff? I guess in terms of going up to Bane or SWTOR, if you want to kind of whatever you consider the stopping point in terms of like an epoch of this history. Um, I guess SWTOR is more the true ending of the epoch, and Bane's like a weird epilogue. Um, but how have you
Yeah,
felt kind of going back to this and kind of looking at what it will become with Tor?
yeah, it's interesting how a lot of this stuff gets prequelized very quickly. Like
Mm-hmm.
KOTOR, originally, like for people who don't know, Bastila from KOTOR,
Mm-hmm.
Bastila Shan was originally Vima Sunrider.
Oh wow, I did not know that. That would
Yep,
be
that was supposed to be Vima, and they changed it late in the game. But that that game set 30 years after the end of this stuff. Exar Kun has a lasting legacy. Jolie Bendo, or whatever his name is, uh, talks about fighting in that war. Uh, you know, the Mandalore stuff from that affects the Mandalorian Wars. Like, it has a direct impact, but we also get like a bunch of armor you can use throughout. Like, there's the craft armor. The craft cultists, their armor's there. You can get K's. Uh, I think like his blaster or something, or like his shield. You can pick
mm-hmm.
up on Korriban.
Mm-hmm.
There's a like Ulick's armor is available. I don't think it actually looks much of anything like it does in the comics. You know, even though it's 30 years later, KOTOR is a lot more Episode 1 oriented, which makes sense because the game was originally going to be set during Episode 2.
Oh
It was going to
wow.
be, yeah, it was originally Outer Rim during Attack of the Clones. It was a tie-in game, and then they decided to move the scope.
That would have
Uh,
been interesting for sure.
mhm. And so that's probably why a lot of the assets and stuff are the same,
Yeah,
or similar.
yeah, you're right about the prequel stuff, and it is kind of interesting to think about. Like, this is only 30. That game's 30 years after the Tales stuff. It's like everything looks so different already. It's like I know technology can move fast sometimes, but dang, uh, yeah, it is interesting. Dude, I don't remember. I haven't played KOTOR in a long time or watched a good walkthrough because it's so dang long. Um, but like, do XR Coon and Ulick get even name drop in that game at all?
Yeah, Jolie mentions them quite a few times. Exar is mentioned a fair bit, and then there's a lot more references in two because two has you go to Onderon
Right.
and Duxon, and so you spend time there, and so there's more references to the events of these comics and the Beast Wars and everything.
Yeah. Uh. No, you're right. I remember that because I remember Treya talked about Onderon. Um, how it's like it will forget the days of freedom that and it will be free. Because of your actions and stuff like that. But yeah, it is interesting, and it's like just how much you talk about first. Like Tails kind of is the foundation for like the entire KOTOR to Tor epoch of Star Wars. Uh, Even though it gets a little weird with the Vitiate stuff, uh, and the Secret Sith Empire and all that. But yeah, I do feel like for the most part, especially like source books and stuff, do a pretty good job of like melding it in with the rest of of what the universe was becoming at the time. But it's always fun to go back and kind of look at it from the perspective of when it was written and kind of like what they all thought. Um, I guess finally, my final point is reading this. It does really feel that Veitch and Lucas were operating on similar wavelength with Star Wars sometimes, doesn't it?
Hmm.
It in terms of just not only just the Phantom Menace stuff, but the dark side, even the Palpatine stuff. Ironically, there is there he. I mean, without a doubt, like obviously he did collaborate a little bit with Lucas, but I'm sure, like I doubt Lucas was telling him all, like they were having tea every day. It's like, and then for the episode 2, Anakin's gonna talk about his hatred for sands. And the Tow's like, yes, sand. Um, but they certainly philosophically felt like he got it, and it's really just cool to see.
Hmm.
But unless you have any final points, Red, I think we'll wrap it up.
Nah, I got nothing more to add.
So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chosen Nightwolf, Matthew, Omar, everyone, Luke Cass, everybody here. Thank you so much for joining. This was fun. Thank you, Red, for coming back.
Hmm.
I'm sure we'll do more Tales of the Jedi again. I hope we do the whole series eventually, 'cause that'll be fun. Um, so yeah, Matthew will be back next week again. Let me get the banner. Again, follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod, Ion Cannon Pod, on Twitter. You can find me at Jedi2021, and of course, follow us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Nothing for this week, for this Friday. Maybe next Friday we will either do a movie night or something. We haven't decided yet, but link in the description below. I will always respond. And of course, Wednesday, don't forget to watch the Tractor Beam at, I believe, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern, for the big interview with Ethan Sachs. We are all excited for that. Matthew, if you're still listening, I'm really hyped. Congrats. He will be again. Matthew will be back next week, where we'll have plenty of new episodes for you. We'll have something for Valentine's Day. We'll have something for Ash Wednesday, and of course, be on the lookout for our 100th episode. Woo! But until then, let's blow this thing and head home.